I never thought that a Christmas dinner, which should be a time of warmth and togetherness, could be the place to expose such a naked and cruel truth. But this year, I gave them no presents with bows, no wine, no empty wishes. I gave them the truth cold, clear and undeniable. It all started when my family, especially my brother and sister-in-law, started talking to me in the middle of the meal. "It's time for you to leave the house," my brother said loudly, raising his glass as if he had just made a grand announcement. Everyone chuckled, looking at each other meaningfully, while I sat there, calm and silent, as if waiting for my acting cue. They thought I had no voice. They thought I would always be the useless younger sibling living at home with my parents. They forgot one thing. I never forget what they did to me over the years, from belittling, blaming, to plotting to push me out of the family. And this year, I had an answer ready. An answer not in words, but in papers, legal and true. In front of the whole family, I slowly placed a piece of paper on the table. No one paid attention at first until I said, "If anyone wants me to leave this house, please read this paper carefully first." The atmosphere suddenly became tense. The contemptuous looks instantly turned to confusion, then silence, then shock. Because that piece of paper was the house ownership certificate in my name. Not my brother, not my parents, just me. And that was my Christmas present. The truth simple, but enough to change everything. Welcome to Twisted Justice, where we tell the emotional, dramatic, and sometimes sweet revenge stories of the Reddit community. Each video is a journey of challenging family relationships, bitter but valuable lessons, and above all, self-affirmation through silence and patience. If you have ever experienced a moment of being disrespected or suffered insults from your loved ones, then today's story is for you. Follow me through this story, and you will see that sometimes justice doesn't need to scream. It just needs a piece of paper and calmness. I was the youngest of 3 children, living in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and my family, at least on the surface, was considered model. My father was a calm, stern, but fair man. My mother was a typical housewife, always concerned with the family's appearance, always teaching me that saving face was more important than personal feelings. And my oldest brother, David, was the one everyone expected to take over the family, the ideal son. In fact, I got used to being overshadowed very early on. I remember clearly when I was a child, when I got good grades, my mother would nod and ask, "What about David? How much did he get?" It was as if my success was never my own, but only a comparison, a shadow that could never reach my brother. Yet I was never jealous. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I just wanted to live in peace, to be myself without being judged. Things started to change when I entered university. While David studied economics and soon got a job at a bank thanks to family connections, I chose to study graphic design, a field that my father bluntly said, "No money." After graduating, I worked freelance for a while, then became unemployed because the company went bankrupt during the pandemic. Financially difficult, I returned home, temporarily living in the old room, with the promise to soon stabilize and move out. At first, my parents agreed, but David did not. He moved back home not long after that because of a job change, bringing along his sister-in-law, someone who always looked at me as if I were a burden. "How long will he be here?" was the first sentence I heard her say, seemingly soft but tearing the air apart. I heard it, of course. I always heard it. But I did not react. I just tried to live quietly, avoiding collisions. I cooked, cleaned, and paid for the electricity and water bills, but it never seemed to be enough. David often teased me. "That's good, sitting around drawing random things and still wanting to live like an adult." Every time, I just smiled and went back to my room. I knew that if I argued back, my mother would call me a discord breaker. I began to realize that in this house, I was always the extra one. No one said it, but they always considered my presence a problem. Every meal was a cold confrontation with seemingly unintentional sentences. We should sell the house and buy a smaller place for our parents to rest. Or, if there were only 3 of us, the house would be less crowded. I was not stupid. I understood what they meant. And perhaps they did not know that I had done something that no one in the house knew about. When my father got into financial trouble a few years ago, I, with the money I saved from my online work and freelance design, paid off most of the remaining mortgage on the house. In return, to keep it a secret and avoid embarrassing my family, I asked to be the sole owner. No one objected. I was the only one with cash at the time. My mother simply said, "Don't tell anyone about this." And I kept my word. I don't brag. I don't use it to control anyone. I still live as a freeloader in the house that's under my name, because I believe that family is more important than paperwork. But I was wrong. As Christmas approached, the atmosphere in the house became more tense. My mother started complaining that I didn't help clean up, even though I was the one who decorated the tree the night before. My sister-in-law complained that I left the desk lamp on too late at night. David started inviting friends over for dinner without warning, turning the living room into a noisy gathering place, then looking at me as if I shouldn't be there. I began to feel suffocated. I was no longer myself in my own home. I thought about moving out, but then I thought, why should I? Why should I, the one who saved this house from being lost, be the one to leave? And then it was Christmas Eve. Everyone gathered around the table, wine, turkey, lights flashing everywhere. It seemed like a peaceful night. But I knew they were waiting, and it was true. As dessert was served, David raised his glass, smiled coldly, and said, "We think it's time to give everyone their own space. I mean, not everyone can live here forever as if they don't contribute anything, right?" The table fell silent. I looked at each person. My mother looked down. My sister-in-law nodded, saying nothing. No one took my side. No one defended me. I wasn't surprised. I just slowly got up, went into the room, opened the desk drawer, took out a prepared envelope, and returned to the dining table. I placed it in front of my brother and said, "If you want me to leave this house, you should read this first." No one said anything. David's eyes widened as he turned the pages. His face turned red. My sister-in-law quietly leaned forward to read along. My mother looked up, snatched the paper, then leaned back in her chair as if she had lost all her strength. I sat down, put a piece of cake on my plate, and said calmly, "Merry Christmas." I began to realize that I was no longer a true part of this family from the smallest things. A slip of the tongue, an annoyed look, a dinner where no one asked what I wanted. No heated arguments, no clear breakdowns, just little by little, they pushed me aside. And then one day, the silence turned into an undeniable truth. They didn't want me here anymore. I remember one time, I finished washing the dishes and left a cup upside down. My sister-in-law walked into the kitchen, didn't say anything, just looked at the cup as if it were the perfect representation of my laziness and uselessness. She didn't need to say anything. I heard it in every sigh, every slam of the cupboard. Then at night, I heard her talking to David in the bedroom, thinking I was asleep. "Tell me, when will he grow up? At his age, he still has to live off." I couldn't sleep that night. David became more and more brazen. In front of his parents, he kept his usual dignified demeanor. But when it was just me and him, the contemptuous words began to spill out. "If I were you, I would feel ashamed to live off your parents for every penny of electricity." Or, "I don't understand why you live like this. Choose a decent path or leave." I remained silent. I was used to being misunderstood. But what bothered me most was not the insults. It was my parents' silent complicity. My mother never defended me. Even when she heard, she just said, "Come on, bear with it. Don't cause trouble on holidays." But how could I not cause trouble when I was the one being erased from the family picture? I thought about leaving, but I also knew that if I left quietly, they would continue the story in their own way. To my relatives and friends, I would always be the ungrateful freeloader who had to be chased away. And the truth? The truth was that I had kept this house from being foreclosed on by the bank. I was, as a legal person, the sole legal owner. But I had accepted to live as if that didn't exist, because I thought that maintaining harmony was more important than power. Until I realized that my patience didn't earn their respect. It only made them encroach. A week before Christmas, David suggested having a party at home, inviting more friends. I didn't object, even though it meant I would have to sleep on the couch, because he needed my room to accommodate his best friend from far away. I didn't object because I wanted to believe that a little sacrifice could lighten the mood. But when I came home late from work and saw them playing loud music and drinking in my room, on my bed, I knew this was more than carelessness. This was blatant disregard. I asked David directly, "Why did you come into my room without permission?" He shrugged. "I thought you were just a temporary guest in this house. What do you own?" At that moment, I didn't say anything, not because I had nothing to say. It was because I was holding them back, just in time. I started preparing. I found all the house papers, printed out notarized copies, and put them in a hard envelope. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it because I needed the truth told, once and for all. And if they wanted to use Christmas dinner to push me into a corner, I would use it to rebuild what they were trying to destroy. I decorated the tree myself. I hung every little bell, every light bulb, cleaned every chair. People saw it and joked, "She's been so good this year." My mother chuckled. "If you know what's good, everything will be fine." Know what's good? Does that mean accepting bad treatment and still smiling? I said nothing. I waited. And when Christmas Eve came, I knew it was coming. People sat around the table, laughing, raising their glasses, exchanging little gifts. Even though no one remembered me on the list, I smiled, still served, still picked up food for my mother, still poured water for my sister-in-law. They thought I couldn't feel it, but I felt everything, every innuendo, every absent glance, each shake of the head in disappointment, until David stood up, glass in hand, half smiling, and said, "Well, this year is special. A new year is coming, and I think it's time for some changes. This house is great, but it's not a place for people to stay forever, especially people who are no longer suitable." All eyes turned to me. David continued, "No offense. It's just sometimes for the better, you have to know when to leave. Right?" No one spoke up. No one objected. No one defended. I put down my fork. I stood up quietly. And I knew the time had come. I stood up in the silence of the Christmas party. Everyone's eyes were on me, each with a different expression. My mother frowned slightly, as if she wanted me to smile, avoid it, and let it go, like I had done before. My sister-in-law folded her arms, her lips slightly curled, looking as if she was waiting for the familiar scene. I would be weak again, then quietly return to my room, silently enduring. But not this time. I walked slowly away from the dining table towards my own room. No one spoke to stop me. No one asked where I was going. Perhaps in their minds, this was just a childish tantrum. A minute later, I returned, holding a neatly closed black envelope placed in front of David. Everyone looked at the envelope, as if they didn't believe something so simple could contain something important. But I knew that if I opened it, the atmosphere in this house would never be the same again. I said nothing. I just sat back down, a glass of water in my hand, my eyes calm, something that seemed to confuse both David and my mother more than anger. David opened the envelope, took out a thick stack of printed papers, and began to flip through them. At first, his eyes were indifferent, but then his forehead furrowed, his lips pressed together. He looked at me, a look of bewilderment and doubt. His hand shook slightly as he turned to the last page, the page with the bright red stamp of the notary office, confirming the ownership of the property in my name, and mine alone. I still said nothing. There was no need to. I let the papers speak for me. My sister-in-law leaned forward to read with me, her face gradually turning pale. My mother leaned back in her chair, her eyes dull, as if she had just discovered something she thought would never happen. She knew. She remembered. She was the one who had signed as a witness when my father transferred ownership. She was the one who told me that year, "Don't tell anyone in the family about this. Save face for your father." And I kept my word. For the past 3 years, I have lived in a house under my name without ever mentioning it once. I still share the living expenses. I still go to work, still pay the electricity and water bills, still live like a freeloader. Because I think family is more important than papers. But that has made me a weak person in their eyes. I took a sip of water, looked straight at David, then spoke slowly, enough for each word to reach everyone in the room. "You're right. Everyone should know when it's time to leave. But sometimes the person who needs to leave isn't the person you think." Silence. David put the stack of papers down on the table, as if it had just burned his hand. He forced a faint smile. "What's going on?" I kept my voice even. "Dad had financial difficulties 3 years ago. The mortgage almost caused this house to be foreclosed on. You didn't know, because you lived in another state at the time. I was the one who paid off the debt, and Dad, wanting to save face, agreed to put my name on the title on the condition that I wouldn't tell anyone." I looked at Mom. She lowered her head. I continued. "I kept my word. But when you stood at the dinner table tonight, telling me that I was no longer fit to be here, I thought, it's time to give everyone back a little bit of the truth. A real Christmas present." No one said anything. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall, and the gentle wind blowing outside the window. David stood up, his eyes red. You kept this for 3 years, just to wait until today? To humiliate me in front of the whole family?" I shook my head, still calm. "No, I kept it for 3 years because I thought family was a place of trust, not of showing off. I waited for you to respect me as an equal part of the family. But instead, you treated me like an extra. You said I was a parasite. You said I needed to leave. So now, if I asked you to do that, would that be fair?" The question was silent, but it struck at the pride of everyone present. David was about to say something, but then he slumped down in his chair, staring at the papers as if hoping they would change their minds. My sister-in-law broke the silence with a trembling voice. "But this is our family home after all. The house your parents have lived in for so many years." I turned to her, and I don't intend to take that away. I never wanted to, but when you and your husband treat me like I'm trash, in the very place I'm in charge of, I have to reiterate the limit. This isn't about ownership, it's about respect. And I don't get that from you anymore. My mother grabbed my hand, trembling slightly. Why didn't you say so sooner? You've endured it for 3 years. Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her, not angry, just tired. Because I know, if I say anything, you will tell me don't make a big deal out of it. Like always. My mother was silent. In that moment, I saw her age. The strong, controlling appearance suddenly disappeared. She was no longer the mother who had scolded me for choosing a not profitable design career. No longer the one who had told me to be quiet to keep the peace at home. She was just a mother, facing the consequences of years of favoritism. I didn't want to drag it out any longer. I stood up, took the stack of papers back, put them in an envelope and said, "I'm not kicking anyone out of here. But from today, if anyone wants to stay, they must understand clearly. I am no longer the youngest sitting at the corner of the dining table, silently enduring all the insults." I turned away, not waiting for anyone to react. I knew that what I had just done was not just telling them the truth. It was breaking an old order that was maintained by silence and prejudice. And I knew that from today on, all relationships in this house would never be the same again. Not because I wanted to break, but because they forced me to. After that shocking Christmas evening, the atmosphere in my house changed completely. The cheerful toasts, the laughter echoing from the living room, all disappeared. Instead, there was silence. A silence as heavy and prolonged as the dust after an explosion. I don't blame them for being silent. I understand that feeling, when people are used to living on a belief that someone weak will always suffer, will always keep silent. The harsh truth is the cruelest thing that can happen. I was silent for too long, and when I spoke, no one was prepared. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. I made coffee as usual, sat in front of the window looking out at the garden. The snow-covered branches were still peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. But in my heart, everything had changed. I opened my laptop and opened the temporary rental agreement I had prepared in advance. Not because I had any intention of evicting anyone, but because I knew there would come a time when I needed to draw the line. I had learned that when people don't understand where the lines are, they will cross you forever. The contract was simple. Every adult in the house, if they wanted to continue living here, had to sign a clear commitment. To contribute to the monthly living expenses in proportion, not to insult or bully others, and to respect my legal ownership rights as the owner of the house. Anyone who disagreed had 1 week to arrange to leave. I printed out 3 copies of the contract and left them on the dining table. Along with it was a notice I taped to the refrigerator, where everyone would surely read it. From December 26th, everyone in the house must sign a temporary rental agreement if they want to continue living here. No sign equals no stay. I won't repeat myself. Simple, clear, no emotion, no tears. My mother was the first to discover the paper. She read it slowly, then picked it up, went to my room, and knocked on the door. "Do you really need to do that?" I looked up, smiled politely. "You don't need to sign. I know this is still your house. But David and my sister-in-law, I think they need to understand their position." My mother paused, then nodded slightly. She turned away, saying nothing more. Perhaps she didn't completely agree. But this time, she didn't defend David. For me, that was enough. In the afternoon, David and his wife came home. I was still sitting in the living room, reading. They didn't say hello. David glanced at me, saw the contract on the table, frowned and read it. He threw the paper on the table and shouted, "What the hell is this?" I raised my head and said in a steady voice, "The contract. Whoever wants to stay, sign it. If not, I will help call a moving service." David looked at me as if I had just become a stranger. His eyes widened, his voice hoarse. "Are you planning to turn me into a tenant in the house I grew up in?" I wasn't angry. I just shrugged. You can look at it that way, or look at it as an opportunity for you to live fairly and equally with everyone in the house. No more superiors or inferiors. No more voices allowed to weigh down on others. The sister-in-law stood next to him, her face pale. She pulled David's hand and whispered, "You don't make a big deal out of it." But David didn't listen. He pointed at my face. "I won't sign. You have no right to force me." I nodded, still calm. "Okay, you have 6 days to arrange things." And I stood up, turned around, and walked back to my room. I didn't need to win the argument. I just needed to let the truth do the work. The next day, I got a text from my mom. David's looking for a place to rent. He won't sign. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. It wasn't my problem anymore. Over the next few days, the atmosphere became more tense. David didn't talk to anyone. He avoided me, but he quietly packed his things. My sister-in-law tried to act normal, but her eyes every time she passed me were filled with worry and fear. On Friday morning, just as I'd predicted, David left the house. No goodbye. No apology. He left a handwritten note. I don't want to live in a house where my brother acts like a cop. I hope you live up to your justice. I finished reading, tore up the paper, and threw it in the trash. Not a single bit of emotion. I didn't expect them to understand me. I just wanted them to know. I was no longer the easygoing person I used to be. A few days later, I started to renovate the house, redoing the living room, adding a separate desk, installing a fingerprint door lock system. I turned the space I was living in into a place where I was truly in control. My mother seemed surprised at first, but gradually got used to the change. She started asking my opinion before making any big decisions. She cooked more, and for the first time in years, she invited me to eat with her without mentioning David. One evening, she sat across from me and slowly said, "I'm so used to letting people think you're easy to control. Maybe I'm wrong. Sorry." I looked up, smiling slightly. "It's okay, Mom. I used to let myself be looked down upon without saying anything. But now it's different, and I really felt it. The difference was not in the papers, nor in the ownership. It was in the fact that I dared to stand up, dared to set limits for myself. And from then on, other people started to look at me differently. 3 weeks later, I received news that David had moved to the suburbs, rented a small apartment. He didn't contact me again. I didn't expect that, but I believed that he would never dare to stand in the middle of a dinner table, point at me and say, "It's time for you to leave again." Because this time, I was the one who said it first, and I said it with my actions. Life returned to normal faster than I thought. No more arguments at night. No more holding my breath as I walked out of the room like I was walking through a battlefield. Winter mornings suddenly became gentler. The sound of boiling water, the smell of steaming coffee, the sunlight through the curtains. Everything became gentle and quiet. I remember the first time after that Christmas. I sat alone in the living room, looked out the window, and saw a child's bicycle passing by. The father behind me was pushing the bicycle and laughing loudly. I used to think that those images were too far away from me. Not because I didn't want a warm family, but because I had lived for too long in a distorted definition of family. A place where love was associated with silence, where sacrifice was distorted into duty, and where the kindest people always suffered the most. That was the first time I asked myself, why did I let others decide my self-worth for so many years? I think about Christmas a lot, not because it changed everything, but because it was the culmination of a silent battle I've been fighting all my life. Growing up, I was the unnoticed child, not because I lacked drive or affection, but because my quietness made people think I didn't need attention. They assumed I was fine if I was pushed aside. If I was pushed aside to make room for others to shine. David was always the star of the show. He was good at school, good at sports, good at communicating, and knew how to make an impression. I wasn't jealous. Honestly, I never was. I just wanted to be recognized, just once, that I was valuable, had feelings, and was worth listening to. But every time I tried to speak up, an invisible wall would appear. Don't make a big deal out of it. You misunderstood. David didn't mean it. And then I stayed quiet. For years. So quiet that I forgot I had a voice. But that Christmas, I found it again. I didn't scream. I didn't expose myself. I didn't get angry. I didn't make a scene. I just handed them a piece of paper, a contract, and let them get the message. From now on, I won't let anyone cross my boundaries again. If someone chooses to disrespect me, they will have to leave my life. Plain and simple. Some might say, that's cold. Maybe. But sometimes, love isn't about being soft-hearted. It's about saying, enough is enough. Because if you don't protect yourself, who will? After David left, my mother changed a lot. She talked less, but listened more. One night, while we were washing the dishes after dinner, she quietly said, "When you were little, I thought you were so strong. I thought you didn't need to be protected like David." I didn't answer right away. I wiped my hands, turned to look at her. "I'm not strong, Mom. I'm just used to enduring." She paused, then hugged me tightly. Didn't say anything, and I think that was the first time my mother hugged me like a real mother. Not out of ceremony, not out of obligation, but because she truly realized I had grown up with so much hurt that she had never known. I don't blame my mother. I don't blame David either, but I know clearly. Forgiveness does not mean allowing repetition, and love should never be a free ticket to selfishness. I learned a lot from that incident, but perhaps the biggest lesson is, you have the right to rewrite your story, at any time, no matter how far it has gone. It's never too late to reclaim respect. There's nothing wrong with choosing to be true to your feelings, and setting limits for yourself. I also realize that family is not blood. Family is where you can be yourself, where you are loved without compromising your self-esteem. If someone keeps hurting you just because they are family, then perhaps they are just acquaintances with the same last name. From that day on, I began to live differently. I laughed more. I reconnected with old friends whom I had avoided because of my inferiority complex. I learned to say no without feeling guilty. I no longer let my kindness become a burden to bear for those who did not deserve it. The following Christmas, I hosted a small party with a few close friends. Nothing fancy, just a cozy meal, some genuine laughter, and heartfelt wishes. My mother was there too. She brought the traditional roast chicken, and for the first time, told a joke that made everyone laugh. No one mentioned David, not because we hated him, but because we all know that some people are only there to teach you a lesson, not to accompany you all the way. And that's what I want to say to everyone watching this. If you're living in an environment where intimacy is just an excuse for someone to control you, insult you, or hurt you, remember, you have the right to walk away. You have the right to demand kindness. You have the right to live a life where you are respected, not just accepted. Don't wait until a sad Christmas like mine to realize this. Start today, with a decisive statement, a small decision, or simply learning to put yourself first. They may be angry. They may tell you to change. That's okay, because sometimes change is necessary. Not to become someone else, but to get back to being yourself. Thank you for following this story to the end. If you've ever been through something similar, or are suffering from injustice in your own home, you are not alone. Twisted Justice is here to tell stories like these. Real, painful, but hopeful. Please like and share this video if you find it thought-provoking. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future journeys of justice. Because justice isn't just in the courts. Justice starts with the smallest decisions, right inside your own heart. If today's story makes you pause for a moment to reflect, if you feel something familiar, from a situation, a look, or a feeling that has been simmering in your heart, then perhaps you understand why we are telling it. This is not just a personal story, but a reminder that you are valuable, that truth and justice sometimes start from the smallest choices. And if you believe that stories like this deserve to be heard, shared, repeated as a lesson, then please help us spread it. Click like to support honest content. Subscribe to become a part of the Twisted Justice community, where the voices that have been forgotten are raised. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, because you won't want to miss the next stories. Honest, emotional, and sometimes full of justice. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next video.